This video is brought to you by the Spider Combat Arena. Support the Kickstarter today.
What's up, guys? Today we're gonna be talking about keys, extremes, in-betweens, and breakdowns. I know, that's a lot.
That's what she said.
But I think it's extremely important that every animator's exclusively, I hate to, to single us out, but I think it's exclusive to very much 3D animators that we understand what all of those are. Because in my education of animation, I've had a lot of mentors, I have a lot of teachers, and they've come from various backgrounds. You have people from Riot Games, to Blizzard, to Sony, ImageWorks. So there's been a lot of tutors, mentors, and teachers, a lot of education. So one thing that I've noticed when it comes to media instructors in critiquing animation is that they'll usually say, hey, you need your breakdown, you need a breakdown here, and then another breakdown here, and you need another breakdown to fully flesh out the movement, right? Usually, that's usually how they go about it. And what I, for the longest, came to believe is that it really much, when it came to animation, there was keys and there were breakdowns. That was it. So you'd have, a whole bunch of breakdowns. Now you could obviously, upon your workflow, you would have more important breakdowns, a hierarchy of breakdowns, but it was pretty much, keys and breakdowns. It wasn't until I came across a 2D animator who had transitioned to 3D. And I think that's extremely crucial because a lot of the 3D guys, a lot of the 3D animators, including myself, don't necessarily come from a 2D background. Now I do, but my 2D animation wasn't nowhere near as far as the education as far as my 3D animation. Because I was like, I'm not gonna draw every single frame, that's crazy. So I immediately transitioned to 3D animation. But you had a good foundation when it came to 2D. But you have a lot of these 3D guys who don't have any foundation in 2D animation. So when it comes to actually doing their animation, it's tough, it's difficult because they don't really have a workflow, they don't really understand the definitions of, follow through, overlap, or extremes and keys and stuff like that. So it's hard to plan out your animation. As opposed to a 2D animator, when they go to 3D, well, they get animation, it's more of a technical challenge of, okay, where's the play button? How do I set keys? How do I change this? How do I delete? So it's a different hurdle. And one thing that I've seen is a difficulty in breaking down animation. And I would argue that is due to the confusion of keys, in-betweens, extremes, and all of this, because many people don't know what they are. So I wanna go over just a brief definition of a lot of these terms, because I think it will extremely improve your animation almost overnight. And then there's very few things that you can do to overnight improve your animation. And one of these is gonna be actually breaking down your animation, breaking it down to a point where you know, hey, I need more keys, or I need more, in-betweens, or I need, more breakdowns, whatever it is. For example, let's say, I don't know, the animation is a punch. You've been, assigned to do a punch. Hey, this guy's punching, person A is punching person B, right? So keys, when we think of keys are our storytelling poses. And I would go further to say, you know what? You want the least amount of keys possible, all right? You want to tell the story. What are the absolutely mandatory poses that you need to tell this story? Because I'm a lazy animator, all right? As they say in Spider-Man 2, lazy but brilliant. Because, I ain't trying to be in front of a computer all day. I'm trying to, get this out, all right? I'm trying to get through the day, spit out the animation, let's go on, let's move on to the next shot or whatever it is, or my personal project. I would argue that the keys of a punch would be, maybe you have the starting position right? We have to see, okay, what is this person doing? I don't know, he's upset. And then the next key, I would argue, would be the actual punch. Bam! And then the next key is going back to, his starting position. So we got three keys, right? 3 storytelling poses. Person starting off, person punching, person going back to idle, or whatever you want to say. Now, the next one would be the extremes. Now, from my understanding, when it comes to extremes, it's kind of self-explanatory, right? It's the extreme movement, right? It's the extreme of the movement. So we only have 3 keys, we'll say idle, punch, idle. Well, what would be the extremes within that movement? Well, the extreme, I would argue, would be an anticipation, right? So now we got idle, an extreme, another extreme, maybe, because we're going from here, but we're going to there. So we'd have another extreme, then maybe an overshoot, right? Because after we punch, we make contact, we have to overshoot, and then, a settle, and then back to, our idle animation. So those would be the extremes. Now, for many people, they consider those breakdowns. Those would be the extremes, the extreme of the movement. Now, this is where people are starting to talk about when it comes to breakdowns, why breakdowns are so important, because they are absolutely important. Because now, what do we have? We have the punch. We have the key, extreme, extreme, key, extreme, extreme, key. That's what we have. Now we have the breakdown. So now, how do we get from here to the anticipation? Are we going up to here? Are we going down to here? Are we leading with the elbow, right? How do we get into this pose? That is gonna be your breakdown. And your breakdown is gonna establish the arcs, right? Because we have the arc, so you're gonna have a breakdown, whatever that is, what's leading, what's following, what are you complementing? Are we going from this pose to this pose, but we're complementing this? And that's where you get ease in and ease out. So are we going, zoop, or are we going, zoop? Or are we going, are we slowing down instead? We go, right? So that's what you have to determine. And in order to determine that comes with planning. You have to know how you want to break this down. How do you want to break down the shot? What's the feel of the shot? What is the character doing? What are we expressing? This is a person that he doesn't really want to punch. Has he been forced to punches? Is this more of a fight or flight where he's like, I have to do this? Because all that is going to dictate what? The motion. It's going to dictate the animation. We are character animators. We are not just moving stuff to point A to point B. Anybody can do that, all right? Not everyone can have you feel some type of way about that movement to point A to point B. But like, even from a ball, right? That seems like a bowling ball. That seems like a basketball. That seems like a tennis ball. That seems like a golf ball. Now that seems like an angry basketball. That seems like an angry bowling ball, right? There is that character that it establishes, that establishes you from everyone else. That's the difference. And that, I think, as far as knowing how to plan out the motion, makes the motion a little easier to plan out. That's what I would say. It makes the motion a little easier to understand what you want to do. Now, of course, if you're, a free spirit and you're just like, I want to do, straight ahead and just go for it, by all means. But it's always great to have a method, right? It's always great to have a method. That way you can break it. It's always great to know the rules, and then if you want to break it, if it suits your animation style, then by all means. So we would have the key, the breakdown, so I'm leading with my elbow, the extreme, right? The breakdown, how are we going from, remember the extreme here, how are we going from here? Are we now going with the leading with the fist? Are we leading with my head, right? Get more of an anime, bam. So all of that has to be, thought out. So let's say I move my head. So now we have a breakdown. This is now favoring the pose. It's favoring the extreme pose. So we have the breakdown, the extreme, right? The key, which was the storytelling pose, the hit, the overshoot. So how are we going with the breakdown between that to this pose? And then, the breakdowns, you get it into the settle, back to the idle. And that's basically, in a nutshell, it should be your form of establishing an animation. And now think about what you can do when you're reference. So now when you're shooting reference, you can go through your reference, be like, key, that's an extreme, that's an extreme, that's an extreme, that's a breakdown, I want to change that breakdown. What happened if, and just reshoot your reference, or at least use it, as, once again, for your timing and spacing, and just like, I don't like that breakdown. What happens if I do this? Because once you understand how to animate, that's when it becomes fun. Because there is nothing worse than going to step, right? And you go to spline and it's just like, what in the world? This looked beautiful in step. It looked beautiful in step. And it's gone to spline and it's gone to hell. It's gone to hell. And I think that's also has to do with the technical side of being a 3D animator, but it also has to do with your blocking. It also has to do with, do you actually know what you want to do? Do you actually know how you want this punch to come off? Do you want it to be aggressive? Do you want it to be fast? Do you know where you want it to be fast? What's your overlaps looking like? What are your, follow-throughs looking like? What's your spacing looking like? Are we gonna have, ease in here, ease out here? What are we doing? So it really goes into understanding the anatomy of what you have in your head, all right? Of what you have in your head. And I think that is really gonna benefit a lot of people. And like I said, overnight, it's gonna benefit you overnight in planning out your shots. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, right, if you found something valuable or informative in this video, or at least entertaining to say the least, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, guys, keep animating.